Movies. There's a good chance you've seen some recently. I've seen way too many recently. This month, July 2024, in the year of our Lord, I honestly think I've seen more movies this month than I have any other month of my entire life. I've watched some absolute bangers, I've watched some absolute letdowns, so let's get straight into the July 2024 1-minute movies, what I watched this month. That was pain. I really need to refine that. I started off the month strong with American Fiction. This is a really, really good satirical, ironic movie. The characters are funny in a subtle way. It's honestly one of those movies where if you're not watching the movie, if it's just playing in the background, you're gonna get a whole lot less out of it than you would if you're actually watching it. Overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. Next up, we have Ralph Breaks the Internet, and I forgot how much I disliked this movie. I don't think I've seen this movie since I saw it in theaters, and oh boy, it really hits different in a bad way when I'm older. For a kids movie, like, I really struggle rating and reviewing kids movies because I'm an adult who, don't get me wrong, enjoys the occasional goofy kids movie, but the older I've gotten, the harder it's become to review serious kids movies. And that's the thing. I don't think this was trying to be a serious kids movie, but for not trying to be a serious kids movie, it has a very deep message. All of that to say, I enjoyed this a whole lot less. There were some really dumb moments in this as well that were just very aggravating and felt like they were obviously there to just move the plot forward. This was a 5 out of 10 film for me. I can't really give it any higher than that. I did still like it, but it's a 5 out of 10. Next up on the list, we have Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. Dadgummit, it's good. I think the older I get, the higher ranked this movie will probably get, and the higher score I will give it. This is really close to a 10 out of 10 movie. Like, this is very close. There's just so much to love about this movie. The acting, amazing. The score, amazing. The story, amazing. A little confusing. This is an amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a very cultural movie. I would honestly say amazing movie. It hits like all of the great adventure movie moments. I think it's one of the best adventure movies that exist out there to date, and it's just really good overall. 9 out of 10 movie for me. Let's move on. Next, I watched Despicable Me 4, and don't flame me in the comments. I know it's a stupid movie. I know it's not meant for everybody, but dadgummit, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I just want to go ahead and let y'all know that. I gave it an 8 out of 10 because I enjoyed watching this movie. Granted, this was the first watch. I have not rewatched it yet. It may drop significantly on the second watching, but I just had a lot of fun watching this movie. This was by far and away not perfect from a story perspective. I do think there were some very disjointed moments, but dadgummit, I had a lot of fun watching this film, and it's an 8 out of 10 film. We need to move on. Next up, I watched National Treasure. This was pretty entertaining. There were some things wrong with it. I think some things could have been shot a bit more clearly. Granted, again, this was 2004, but you have to think about something. Recently, some people have been telling me, you have to think about the time the movie was made. To which I say, Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl was made in 2003, a year before this. So some of the things that I dislike about this movie exist anyways. This was a good film. On some days, I would enjoy it a whole lot less than I enjoy it on other days. The day in particular that I watched it, I was feeling fairly gracious. I was feeling, not super nitpicky. I wasn't super in my head. I will say I did turn my brain off for about the last, no, not the last, in the middle of the movie for like 20 to 30 minutes. It did start to lose me. It did get a little bit boring, but this was good. This was a 7 out of 10 film. Next up, I watched Monkey Man, and I feel like I can finally give a definitive answer on whether or not I enjoy this movie. Do I like the movie? Yes. Am I excited to see what Dev Patel directs in the future? Absolutely. Because I think this was a great starting spot, but I think it had a decent bit wrong with it. My first complaint is that there's just way too many flashbacks. It's almost very aggravating how many flashbacks were in this movie. Some things feel a little bit disjointed. I do think shaky cam was used a little bit too much in the start. I am a fan of the theory of, like, you know, he couldn't really fight well before, so the camera movement follows his ability to fight, whereas at the end of the movie, he can fight super well, so the camera movement is very, very polished and clean and professional. But the shaky cam was a little bit aggravating because there were a couple times towards the start of the film where I was like, okay, actually, what's going on? Like, I don't know what's happening anymore. I don't know what the focus of the frame should be. I don't know what's happening. That happened 2 or 3 times in one of the earlier fight scenes. I struggle to see how an epic training montage to some absolutely epic bongo drums, like, absolutely crushed it on the bongos. I just fail to see how that, like, all of a sudden makes you an expert at wielding fireworks, or dare I say, high heels. At the end of the day, this was a 6 out of 10 film for me, because I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. Like, it wasn't awful. The first time I watched this was like a 3 out of 10. I had no idea what was going on. But then I watched a YouTube video or two, I gained a little bit more context, and then I rewatched it, I enjoyed it more. Next up, I watched Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and this was an all-around good Mission Impossible movie. It wasn't anything super unique, but it also wasn't bad like some of the other Mission Impossible movies. This was all around a 7.5 out of 10 film for me. I really enjoyed it. I do think there are better things that you could watch, but I think in terms of Mission Impossible, this is pretty high up on my list. Next up, I watched Terminator Genisys, and man, they really lost me with this one. This was the first Terminator movie that I ever saw. I saw it on DVD when I was 13, and this is a perfectly fine movie. Like, there are way better things that you could watch with your time. This was a 4 out of 10 movie for me. I can't really give it more than that. Next up on the list, we have Fly Me to the Moon. And this actually really surprised me. This was a movie that my mom literally just said that day. She was like, hey, there's a showing of this at this time. Do you want to go see it? I was like, not really, but sure. I was like, I don't particularly care about seeing it. The trailer didn't convince me to watch it, but sure, I'll go watch it with you. And I ended up really enjoying it. The acting was really good. The set design was really good. About 5 minutes from the start of the film and 5 minutes from the end of the film could have been cut. You could easily get rid of a total of about 15 minutes from this movie. I think it was right at 2 hours long. Could have easily been an hour 45. But that's just a personal, fairly small nitpick. This was an 8 out of 10 film for me. I really enjoyed it, and I was really compelled by it. Then I watched The Founder, and oh my gosh, this was really good. If you haven't watched, I just spit all over the place. If you haven't seen this movie, go watch it right now. It's a movie literally about McDonald's, and I thought it was going to be just one glorified McDonald's ad, but I'm not going to lie, it's a hit piece on McDonald's. It's just a very good movie. Yeah, like, I'm getting excited talking about this. It's a very sad movie. But I think that's necessary for the film as a whole. So if you haven't seen The Founder, go watch it right now. I'm gonna make a whole stinking video review, probably a video essay on it. On Letterboxd, I cooked for 15 minutes straight typing up this review. Usually my reviews consist of talking to Siri for a minute or two and making a review that way, but this was literally like me sit down, type it out for 15 or 20 minutes. It was so good. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. Then I watched A Bug's Life, which I had actually never seen. I think this is one of Pixar's most forgettable movies, mainly because it was sandwiched between Toy Story and Toy Story 2, so therefore it's pretty easy to forget about it. And it was good. I would give it a 7 out of 10 overall. It's fairly predictable, and it's like not amazing, but at the same time it is good. And if you're looking for something, especially a cute kids movie to watch, I would go watch this because it was pretty good. Then, really doing a 180 from watching A Bug's Life, I watched Annihilation. I'm sorry, that's one of the funniest contrasting movies that you could watch that I can think of. I had a hard time keeping up with what was going on because there is a significant use of flashbacks. This suffers from the flashback problem that Monkey Man suffered from. That knocked at some points for me, but then also, I don't think this movie was made for me, for one, but for two, I had a hard time understanding what was going on, and the fact, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the fact that it ended the way it did annoyed me. I would love to have seen more closure. If you haven't seen Annihilation, it ends relatively ambiguously, and that the action could have been a bit better, because throughout the course of this movie, there's like 3 bits of action, and one of them is really, really good. I really enjoyed one of them, but then the other 2 are just kind of like animal attacks, animal is peppered with 94.5 bullets, animal dies. Like, that's kind of, sort of the extent of the action. I just feel like there could have been a lot more done with this concept, and I don't think that much was done, and that was kind of irksome, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. For me personally, this was a 4 out of 10 film. I do think the sound design and score was amazing. I think that the acting was amazing, and I think that the set design was amazing. From a story perspective, it wasn't that great of a story, in my opinion, and I just didn't really particularly care for it. Then I watched 4 short films late one night. I don't really want to comment on these very much because I feel like it was late and I can't exactly accurately analyze any of them. Then I watched The Magnificent Seven, and this was not quite as good upon the second watch. A thing I didn't like about this movie is that basically the only thing separating the good guys from the bad guys is the good guys kill a lot of people for better reasons. And I don't really know how else to put that. Like, the good guys kill just as many, if not way, way more people than the bad guys, but the bad guys are the bad guys. I don't know, this movie, I struggled to see the differentiation between the good guys and the bad guys, and it was a little blurry and whatnot. I watched this about 3 years ago, and I thought it was much better than I did now. Now, I'd give it probably a 6 out of 10 personally. There are much better westerns that you could watch, but there are also much worse westerns that you could watch, so this was good but not great. Then I began my Deadpool and Wolverine preparations by watching Logan. Logan is such a good superhero movie if you haven't seen it. It's one of the best superhero movies in my opinion. About 4 years ago I wouldn't have agreed with that opinion, but now I'm willing to say it's probably in my top 5 superhero movies. Maybe top 3, but I'd have to have a list of all superhero movies that I've seen out in front of me. While it is very, very violent and very, very profane as well, I still think this was an amazing movie. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. And if you haven't seen Logan before, I would highly recommend you go watch it because it was really good. And then I watched Deadpool. I don't really have that much to say about this movie. My Letterboxd review was very, very short, and I'm kind of using my Letterboxd reviews for talking points. This was funny at times, but it wasn't that funny, in my opinion. It wasn't as funny as people give it credit for. This was a 4 out of 10 film for me. There are better things you could watch. You should spend your time watching better movies than this. I could explain this whole movie to you in, like, 1 minute, probably. Then I watched Deadpool 2, and Deadpool 2 is better than the first one, but not by very much. It's still not great. I think the action is way, way better in the second one. That's mainly because they had a larger budget. I think the acting is better in the second one. I think the story, in my opinion, is way better in the second movie than the first. And yet again, I'm personally not a fan of unnecessary vulgarity, and this movie had quite a bit of it. I think language is one of those things that we need to kind of tone back in movies a little bit, and this movie had a whole lot of language. So it was still good, but it was not great. I would give it a 5.5 or 6, depending on the day, out of 10. Then I watched No Country for Old Men, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't understand why this movie is as popular as it is. I really don't. A lot of people love this movie. A lot of people say it's one of the best movies ever made. It did win a lot of Oscars. That's one of the reasons why I watched it, but I have a hard time understanding why so many people love this thing. So without getting into spoilers, because spoilers will be very, very easy to do for this movie, the last 20 minutes of this movie absolutely sucks. I, again, won't spoil anything, just in case you haven't seen it. There is a perspective shift that is extremely annoying at the end of the movie. For the last 20 minutes, I would argue, most annoying part of the movie, that's the crazy thing, is like, this movie was fine but not amazing up to the last 30 minutes. And then in the last 30 minutes, things kind of start to take a downward turn, and then the last 20 minutes in particular are annoying as heck. I think this movie would have very much benefited from some resolution. I think that Anton Chigurh is an amazing villain, and he very obviously stole the show in this movie. He was the main character of the movie. Even though he was the bad guy, he was the main character. Like, no doubts about it. And also, I just want to make a whole video on No Country for Old Men, basically ranting about, like, how do people love this movie. But overall, this was a 5 out of 10 movie for me. Ooh, and then finally, the movie I had been waiting literally all month for, Deadpool and Wolverine. I was super, super excited for this thing. I was so thrilled. And it ended up being a 6 out of 10. I need to rewatch this, and I will rewatch this in the next couple days, but I was really, really conflicted about this movie because the story, okay, let me paint a quick picture. And this is, yet again, no spoilers, so I won't spoil anything for you. The movie starts and quite literally, like, straight up goes straight up. Like, it starts so well. The first 20-25 minutes of this movie are amazing. And then it plateaus. And it gets fine towards the end. Then I would argue it dips down a bit. And then it plateaus and it rides that all the way. Without getting into spoilers, this movie literally makes fun of the multiverse multiple times, and then proceeds to rely heavily on the multiverse. If you've seen my short about it, you know how aggravated this made me. Towards the end of the movie in particular, it relies very, very heavily on the multiverse, and that's really, really stupid, in my opinion. I think Marvel needs to pivot away from the multiverse, because I think it's overall harmful, because there aren't stakes anymore. People dying in Marvel doesn't really mean anything anymore, because you can just pull in more people from the multiverse. This is still a fine movie. I would give it a 6 out of 10, like I said. It'll probably get higher on my second rating, because I won't be so fresh with it. I'll be able to look at it through a purely objective standpoint rather than a fan standpoint on my second watch. I'm also going to make a full-length, long-form video on this because I have a lot to say about this thing. And finally, to wrap this month up, I watched Inside Out. And Inside Out was good. I don't remember it being quite as on the nose as it was, because I typically like Pixar movies that they have a main story, and the main story is for the kids, but there's always an underlying message. There's always a life lesson or a hidden meaning. I prefer the hidden meaning in Pixar movies. This movie is, it is very on the nose. It's very, this is the meaning. This is what it is, which is fine. It doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. I still really, really enjoyed it. I thought the characters were compelling. There's a couple particular moments in the movie that are really, really plot holey and annoyingly like, how did you not think of this? How did this not happen? How are you not back in headquarters? If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. but it grinded my gears. They also had the, okay, now you're supposed to cry now moment. I think at the end of the movie, if you like kind of sort of cry, then naturally you're at the end of the movie, you're at the end of the conclusion. Like the ending of Inside Out, if you cry at that, perfectly reasonable. I almost did. There's a moment in this movie where I, again, won't spoil it. Somebody dies, kind of, and it's not right at the end of the movie that this happens. This is a very emotional moment, but it is quite literally like Pixar. In the way that whole scene is constructed is quite literally Pixar saying, okay, and now you are supposed to cry. It was aggravating, in my opinion. It almost made me cry, but I was like looking at it from a very analytical lens, and I was just sitting there going, they're doing everything in their power to like, this feels kind of cheap. To be perfectly honest, like this, it does advance the story, and it's not wholly unnecessary, but it felt a little bit derogatory to be like, you know, okay, and now you're supposed to cry. It's like, you know, dance and such. I still think this was an 8 out of 10 film for me. I think this is still a great kids movie, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did when I was younger, which is a shame because I really, really loved this movie when I was younger, but I also didn't see plot holes like I do now when I was younger, so there is that. But yeah, that's everything I watched in July. Let me know your thoughts. Take a look at this list. Maybe watch some movies on this list. Form your own opinions. Yes, I stole that from another YouTuber. If you have Letterboxd, you can link your Letterboxd profile in the description down below. I'll check it out. I'll maybe even rank your Letterboxd profiles at some point. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, comment the dinosaur emoji. Is there a dinosaur emoji? Oh, there is. Okay. If you made it this far in the video, go ahead and comment a dinosaur emoji. That way I know you've watched this far. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Movie Boy, and I'll talk with y'all later.